Alright, guys and girls, this is Jerningham here. To you guys and girls that are in America, 400,000 people have died of coronavirus. And Joe Biden is going to be doing a speech, and the woman's going to be singing a song. It's very saddening, I know. But we're going to be showing you the song, what's going to be sung or singed.
Will be inaugurated without the traditional crowds, with Washington on lockdown after the siege earlier this month.
And Donald Trump's speech again as well.
The president had a special message for COVID victims. Donald Trump, meanwhile, delivered his farewell address, saying the political movement he created is only just beginning, before issuing a final flurry of more than 100 pardons and clemencies, including to former aide Steve Bannon and even the rapper Lil Wayne. Our US correspondent Greg Milam has our first report.
In the shadow of Washington's monuments on the eve of his inauguration, Joe Biden did something his predecessor never has.
Amazing grace.
A national moment of mourning for the now 400,000 victims of COVID-19, a crisis certain to dominate the start of his presidency.
To heal, we must remember. It's hard sometimes to remember, but that's how we heal. It's important to do that as a nation. That's why we're here today. Between sundown and dusk, let us shine the lights in the darkness along the sacred pool of reflection. Remember all that we lost.
The symbolism of a new look in Washington was powerful. At the place he will soon call home, the outgoing president had delivered the case for the defense of his presidency.
I took on the tough battles, the hardest fights, the most difficult choices, because that's what you elected me to do. I want you to know that the movement we started is only just beginning. There's never been anything like it.
And 78 days after the election, these wishes for his successor.
This week, we inaugurate a new administration and pray for its success in keeping America safe and prosperous. We extend our best wishes, and we also want them to have luck.
In such unprecedented times, it will be an inauguration unlike
Sentenced of 403 people has final hours. Office includes formless dates.
already altered
Stephen
by a pandemic, shut
Bannon.
down as a public event after the storming of the Capitol. A sign of the edginess, a dozen members of the National Guard have been removed from duty, some for their ties to far-right groups.
The inauguration is traditionally the biggest party that Washington throws, but everything is so different this year. Empty streets, fences, the National Guard. But it's telling of a real nervousness in America and indicative of the country that Joe Biden is about to inherit.
The US Capitol laid on quite a show at sunset, a city and a country scarred by the last 2 weeks and divided by the last 4 years, and uncertain of what its new dawn will bring. Greg Milam, Sky News, Washington.
Let's speak to Sky's Sally Lockwood, joining us now from Washington, D.C. Good to see you this morning, Sally. President Trump leaves the White House in much the same way as he entered, with controversy around his actions, a final flurry of activity from Donald Trump. He's commuted the sentences and pardoned the crimes of over 100 people.
That's right. We were expecting this flurry of pardons a few days ago, but Donald Trump has left it very, very late indeed. 11 hours left in office, and more than 100 pardons and commutations of sentences dropped. A big list of names. One of the key names on there, though, was his former chief strategist, Steve Bannon, who was accused of defrauding hundreds of thousands of people who donated to a campaign to build a wall between the US and Mexico. Remember that wall that Mexico was supposed to pay for? Well, he's accused of taking a bunch of that money for personal use from a fund that was more than $25 million of donations from people. Now, of course, there's nothing standard about this inauguration. Not only are there 25,000 members of the National Guard here in Washington, D.C. alone trying to ensure security surrounding this inauguration, you also have Donald Trump, his last night in the White House with Joe Biden, the next president, staying in the president's guest house next door, yet the two men won't be speaking. There will be no handshake, no handover, no arguing about how big the crowd is. But certainly within the next 10 hours, Donald Trump will be gone and Joe Biden will be the 46th president of the United States.
Sally, many thanks indeed. Very pleased to say, joining us now on the programme once again, the Home Secretary, Priti Patel. Ms Patel, great to have you on this morning. Do hope you're well. Of course, we cannot begin our discussion on the day that the 46th President of the United States takes office without discussing events on the other side of the Atlantic. As he leaves office, what are your thoughts on the tenure of Donald Trump?
Look, first of all, I think I was on your program just 2 weeks ago actually saying that, we have an incredibly strong relationship with the United States of America, and our government will always work with, the president and his incoming team. Now, in terms of the Trump administration, again, we have worked very strongly with the outgoing president's administration on a range of issues, and notwithstanding the fact that a great deal has happened over, his tenure as president, all sorts of international events. He's been very robust in terms of a particular posture when it comes to parts of the world, such as the Middle East. But quite frankly, we move on now. There is a new incoming president. Our Prime Minister has rightly so been in touch with President-elect Biden. We've got an exciting agenda as two strong democratic countries, coming together that'll be working together on a range of issues as we go into this year. We're holding the presidency of the G7. We'll be chairing the UN Security Council. We'll be hosting the COP conference. We've got a whole agenda on climate change. So, for us, it's very much business as usual with a new team at this very exciting time with this big handover, this, change in power structures, bases and politics in the United States.
Sure, but at least for the next few hours, Donald Trump does remain president of the United States. And I wonder, is it good that a man who can't be trusted with his social media accounts is trusted with the nuclear codes?
Well, look, I've said this before in terms of what we've seen over recent weeks, and the violence that we saw, in Washington, which thoroughly unacceptable. The fact of the matter is now, today is a historic day. It's Inauguration Day in the United States. It's a moment of change with a new administration coming in. And as, you'd expect, the British government, the government across the United Kingdom, looks forward to working with President Joe Biden and his administration on a whole range of issues where we have shared interests, on the security of our collective countries, the safety and security of the world, but a whole range of issues, in terms of internationalism, bilateral relations, multilateralism going forward. There's a lot going on in the world right now. I think we all agree on that. And it's important that our two nations come together and show the global leadership that, both the US but the United Kingdom will always step up and do.
Is Joe Biden, in your opinion, better for America than Donald Trump?
Well, look, there's a change in presidency, but as ever, and we can say this as well, when administrations change, the world changes, the direction of travel from politicians in particular, from political leaders, will always reflect some of the challenges and changes that we see going on domestically and internationally. A new political era is now starting in America. And as I've said, there's a lot to do globally. There really is, as well as in the US, certainly uniting the United States, at the end of the Trump administration and as Joe Biden takes over. But also, as I've said, stepping up to really confront and address many of the global challenges that we face collectively. And America has an enormous role to play in terms of global leadership. And we look forward to supporting America, on many of those challenges.
A global challenge as much as a domestic challenge is, of course, the problem that every country has with drugs. Here in the UK, we're going to be getting a little bit tougher with some, I have to say, significant investment. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, that's right. I've made it the mission of this government over the last 12 months to focus on rolling up county line drug gangs. We've seen for far too long drug use across the country, but actually kids in particular being used by these awful gangs to peddle drugs around the country. Now, we've had amazing law enforcement successes over the last 12 months with thousands of lines being shut down, criminal actions being taken, but also protecting vulnerable kids that have been very much preyed upon and used as part of this criminal activity. But alongside this work, we're now putting in this health secretary and myself, Matt Hancock, working to put in £148 million to really look at this whole issue from an end-to-end perspective. So while I deal with the law enforcement side, we are now looking at the drug treatment and the rehabilitation side, because too many individuals and communities have been blighted by drug misuse across the country. So we're now putting in £80 million of investment into drug use or drug misuse centres, how we can get treatment into people that need that help and support. We've got some pilot projects, 5 pilots across the country, and we're putting in the largest increase for drug treatment in particular. First time in 15 years. So this is very, very significant. And as I've said, communities have been blighted for far too long. And this is important and essential work that we need to do to turn people's lives around. And it's all part of our up agenda.
Could we please talk about the problems that there have been with the Police National Computer? 400,000 records, including fingerprint, DNA, arrest records, were apparently wiped. At the weekend, you said you had technical staff working on the issue. How much have we been able to recover?
So first of all, let me just clarify this. This is a coding issue. So in terms of records and retrieving records, much of this data exists in other systems as well. So, there is a lot of technical work underway right now to retrieve.
How much
Hundreds of thousands have been calibrated, wiped police database.
Because our officials and technicians here, engineers, have had to apply new code to the actual Police National Computer System. And
could you then tell us how much is on other databases then? How much of the information we can recoup?
No, we can't, because there are a range of other connected databases. So these records, this is complicated, because the code that was applied to wipe and delete records is a new code, but we have to do this on a weekly basis. So there is a multi-system recovery process taking place right now, and that is taking time. So we will update Parliament and colleagues in Parliament as well, and the public, once we know exactly the type of records that we have that have been retrieved. But I'll be very clear as well, if we have to go back to files, working with our policing and operational partners to put in manual uploads, that's exactly what we will absolutely do. But it's important to say the computer itself is working, and law enforcement agencies and partners are still able to access the data, upload files.
Sure.
How we retrieve some of these files that were deleted. But as I've said, there are multiple records that are held in different sources. So, we talk about a figure of 400,000. The actual figure could actually be a lot less.
Well, when you know, please do come on and let us know.
Absolutely, we will do that. But as I said, it will take time.
Yeah.
This is the coding issue. It takes time.
We do need to talk COVID-19 just for a second. Last week, I had the Health Secretary on the programme making it crystal clear that there was absolutely no time frame in place for the relaxation of lockdowns. Brandon Lewis, yesterday on the programme, made similar comments. But once again,
Reports suggested Prime Minister is working on the planned East lockdown by
the Mail as well,
Easter.
all reporting that there is now a framework in place within government for the easing of restrictions starting around about the beginning of April. First, is that true? Second, if you can't answer that question, why am I reading about it in the papers again?
Well, look, first of all, I can't be responsible for what appears in national newspapers and speculation.
The government representative on the programme this morning.
Well, no. Let me just put some context around this. I mean, we are at a pivotal stage. I think I've always said this about coronavirus. Our vaccine rollout is underway, but we have a long way to go with vaccination. We cannot talk about easing restrictions and measures until we are absolutely clear that we have vaccinated proper groups. And we go much further.
But you can't talk about them publicly. But clearly, once again, several papers have been briefed. This briefing hasn't been plucked from thin air. Someone in government has done this, whether it's a civil servant, special advisor, or a minister, we don't know. But the discussion is clearly taking place in Whitehall. Yes or no?
Well, it's right that work always takes place in terms of the future recovery post-coronavirus. And that work, is multifaceted. It's not just about lifting restrictions. It's also about how we can focus on a range of challenges and priorities post-coronavirus. That work will always take place. But I should emphasise to your viewers this morning, it is far too early to even speculate as to when lockdown measures will be eased and the restrictions will go. We are still in a perilous situation. I cannot emphasize acting up. We see that
Dominic Raab on the Sophie Ridge programme on Sunday mentioned, the middle of February, literally mentioned the middle of February. That is the point at which we can start looking at the case numbers and considering relaxing. And that's the Foreign Secretary.
Well, the middle of February is the date for when we aim to vaccinate those people in the top 4 priority cohort areas. So that is the over 80s, and huge work is taking place on that. But in particular, those who are susceptible to coronavirus.
Full of excuses, in my opinion, these governments are. They're making up as they go along, I think.
Our mid-February target with the vaccine rollout and that programme. But quite frankly, I mean, I will say
They don't seem
this
to know
again.
what's going on.
When I look at, the incredible work that's taking place in the NHS right now, when we still see hospitalisation figures, now standing at over 38,000 people, with the number of people still dying with coronavirus, with the number of hospital admissions still increasing, this is no time to speak about the relaxation of measures, and we're not going to do that publicly yet. We have a long way to go, which is why, you see me out with the police, frequently speaking to the police, talking about the work that we constantly do around compliance and enforcement. That work is going to continue, because by doing that, we will continue to save lives and protect the NHS, which is absolutely imperative right now.
Home Secretary, always good to have you on the programme. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Let's dip into a bit of a reaction of political correspondent Joe Pike, as always in the studio. What left out at you, I have to say, once again, we are getting, from my perspective, something approaching mixed messages as regards the timescale and when we might be coming out of this.
Yeah, little clarity on restrictions. Firstly, though, on the US, I thought it was interesting that she said, frankly, we need to move on from Donald Trump's presidency. Of course, we're moving to a Biden administration. Joe Biden, a couple of years ago, implied he didn't particularly have a particularly positive view of Boris Johnson, saying that he was the physical and emotional clone of Donald Trump. Now, Downing Street are doing their best to build a more positive relationship. Priti Patel saying that there is already an incredibly strong one. On that big issue of the police national computer and seemingly 400,000 records disappearing through some human error, she said it was a coding issue. Much of the data exists elsewhere, but she cannot tell us how many of those records have already been retrieved. A big sort of unknown there. And as you say, on COVID restrictions, too early to speculate. She said little clarity, but I think we will have more clarity later from Sir Patrick Vallance, the Chief Scientific Advisor. Perhaps not on the decisions, Neil, the thinking behind the decisions over restrictions, over vaccinations, and what the future could look like.
Yeah, indeed. Joe, thanks a lot. Time for us, though, as always, to take a look at the latest COVID-19 data here in the UK. It's pretty good. 1,610 deaths were recorded of people who died within 28 days of a positive test. As you can see, that brings the total number of people who died with COVID to 91,470. In the most recent 24-hour period, there were 33,355 new infections, but 4.27 million people have received their first dose of a coronavirus vaccine so far. Just a reminder, we'll have that Q&A session with the government's Chief Scientific Advisor, Sir Patrick Vallance, this morning. That's at 8:30. Very busy show, in fact, this morning. Plenty coming up at 5:30. I'm going to be speaking with Anthony Scaramucci, the former White House Communications Director, fired after just 10 days. We'll be talking about his time in office, Donald Trump, and of course, what Joe Biden might have ahead. We're also hearing from Lord Darragh, now the former UK ambassador to the US, for his thoughts
Belfast, Northern Ireland.
for America and of course the world. And at 8:20, I'll be getting the thoughts of the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Lisa Nanny. The incoming US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, says he agrees with the Trump administration that China has committed genocide in its repression of the Uyghurs and other mainly Muslim people. Let's speak now to our Asia correspondent, Tom Cheshire. He's in Beijing this morning. Tom, what is the reception likely to be in Beijing to all of this? Of course, Donald Trump was first, Joe Biden continuing with it, and other nations around the world.
Yeah, the reaction is likely to be furious. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is holding its press conference now. I mean, this is an extraordinary statement by Mike Pompeo, accusing China of genocide and crimes against humanity. He also said, I believe this genocide is ongoing. that we're witnessing the systematic attempt to destroy Uyghurs by the Chinese party state. This is a really significant designation of genocide, and China will react strongly to that. At a press conference last week, they said the idea of genocide was the conspiracy of the century, and the editor of a nationalistic tabloid paper here said that Pompeo has hijacked the spotlight in garbage time. You're still going to be kicked out of office today. The problem, as you mentioned, is that the incoming administration holds much the same views. They're unlikely to discard this designation, as the nominee for Secretary of State has said he agrees with that. So this is going to be what it's like going forward. There's going to be no less
Beijing, this is, yeah.
rivalry between China and the US, again with this added moral heft of a genocide designation. What it will do, as you mentioned, is put pressure on others around the world, the UK and the EU in particular. They've been looking to sign trade deals, or in the case of the EU, have signed an investment agreement with China with not much consideration of these sorts of issues. There's going to be a lot more pressure from the Biden administration now. They're going to take a dim view of that sort of thing, and they have the added moral heft of this designation of what China is doing in Xinjiang as genocide.
Tom, many thanks. Let's take a look at a few of the other stories making the rundown this morning. And Theresa May has criticised Boris Johnson, accusing him of abandoning Britain's position of global moral leadership. Writing in the Daily Mail, the former Prime Minister was critical of her successor for failing to honour British values by reducing the foreign aid budget and threatening to break international law over the Brexit bill. The Russian opposition politician Alexei Navalny is due to appear in court this morning, accused of defaming a World War II veteran. Ahead of his appearance, Mr. Navalny and his supporters have made further allegations of corruption against President Putin. Seafood companies hit by Brexit delays will be able to claim compensation from the government. The Department for the Environment and Food and Rural Affairs says that companies exporting fish and shellfish to the EU will be able to claim up to £100,000. Time to see how the weather is looking this morning. Isabel is on deck, and it's looking like the map just to your left there. Isabel signals that this is going to be a pretty wet day and potentially a dangerous one.
Absolutely right. Yeah, it's not just the Met Office, it's also the Environment Agency that's keeping a close eye on this, because the rainfall totals really mounting up. In this 3-day spell, Tuesday to Thursday, we could easily see 150 to 200 millimetres of rain falling across high ground of North Wales and North West England. So let's take a look at the impacts by starting with the warnings.
Well, guys and girls, I've hoped you all enjoyed that. Give it a like, give it a comment. If you want to see more in the news, there's a news channel on YouTube or on the TV. So thank you for joining this video, and see you in the next one. Peace.